Sometimes, the person who changes a king's life is the one nobody else notices. 40 feet above the forest floor, Evelyn Hart was beginning to wonder if she was going to spend the entire night trapped in a tree. The late afternoon sun filtered through the towering pines of Blackthorn Forest, painting the world in streaks of gold and amber. A cool breeze drifted through the branches, carrying the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and distant wildflowers. Under different circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Right now, it was humiliating. Evelyn tightened her grip around the thick branch beneath her. Her fingers were trembling from exhaustion. She had been stuck there for hours. Not because she had climbed the tree for fun, not because she was reckless, but because she had made the mistake of caring. It had started with a tiny cry. A frightened baby bird had fallen from its nest after a strong wind swept through the forest that morning. Most people would have walked past. Most people would have told themselves nature would take care of it. Evelyn couldn't. She never could. So she climbed. The nest sat nearly 40 feet above the ground, balanced among the upper branches of one of the oldest trees in the territory. She had managed to return the small bird safely to its family. The problem started when she tried to climb back down. One misplaced step, one loose branch, one moment of panic. Her boots slipped, and her dress became tangled around a fork of thick branches. She had managed to catch herself before falling, but now she hung awkwardly between two limbs, unable to move up or down without risking a much bigger problem. Evelyn let out a long sigh and rested her forehead against the rough bark. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself. The forest offered no response. It rarely did. Being an Omega had taught her what silence felt like. People rarely looked for her, rarely noticed when she disappeared. Her pack tolerated her presence, but nobody sought her company. Nobody worried when she wandered into the woods alone. If she failed to return by sunset, it might take a day before anyone realized she was missing. The thought should have hurt more than it did. She had grown used to disappointment. Above her, the baby birds chirped happily inside their nest. At least someone appreciated her efforts. That small thought pulled a faint smile onto her face. The smile faded as she glanced toward the horizon. The sunlight was changing. The golden glow was slowly melting into deeper shades of orange and violet. Evening was coming. Shadows stretched longer across the forest floor below. The temperature dropped a little with every passing minute. Evelyn swallowed hard. Spending the night in a tree had sounded funny an hour ago. It felt considerably less funny now. She shifted her weight carefully. The branch beneath her creaked. Instantly she froze. Her heart skipped. Even the birds went quiet for a moment. "Okay," she whispered. No sudden movements. A squirrel darted across a nearby branch and disappeared into the leaves. Evelyn watched it with open envy. The little creature moved freely through the forest while she remained stuck like a decoration hanging from the tree. Another gust of wind rustled the canopy overhead. Leaves danced through the air and spiraled toward the ground. Evelyn followed their path with her eyes. Somewhere below, hidden beyond layers of branches and fading light, the forest floor seemed impossibly far away. She drew a slow breath and forced herself to stay calm. There had to be a solution. There always was. Yet as the last rays of sunlight slipped behind the distant mountains, an unfamiliar feeling settled deep inside her chest. For the first time all day, she wondered if anyone was coming at all. Then, somewhere far below, she heard the faint sound of approaching hoofbeats. The hoofbeats grew louder, steady and deliberate against the forest floor. Evelyn lifted her head so quickly that a loose strand of blonde hair caught across her face. For one hopeful second, relief flooded through her chest. Someone was out there. Someone had actually come. Then reality followed close behind. Nobody was looking for her. The thought returned as quickly as it had left. Whoever was riding through Blackthorn Forest had simply happened to pass nearby. Still, accidental rescue was better than no rescue at all. She swallowed and leaned forward as much as her awkward position allowed. The branches shifted beneath her weight. Leaves rustled around her, making it difficult to see through the thick canopy. The rider remained hidden below. Another series of hoofbeats echoed through the trees before suddenly slowing, then stopping. Silence settled over the forest once more. Evelyn held her breath. Had they heard something? A bird chirped overhead. Somewhere farther away, water trickled through a shallow creek. The world seemed to pause. Then a deep male voice drifted upward through the trees. "That is strange." Evelyn blinked. The voice sounded calm, strong. Not alarmed or hurried. Simply curious. "Hello," she called. Her voice came out louder than she intended. Immediately, several birds burst from nearby branches. "Up here." Another pause followed. "Up where?" the man asked. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. "In the tree." The silence that followed felt significantly longer. "The tree?" "Yes." "You are in the tree?" Heat rushed into her cheeks. Unfortunately, somewhere below, she heard what sounded suspiciously like someone trying not to laugh. "Well," the stranger said after a moment, "that is certainly not where I expected to find anyone today." Evelyn groaned softly. "I am very aware of that." More leaves shifted beneath her as she attempted to get a better view. Finally, through an opening in the branches, she caught sight of him. He sat atop a large black horse near the base of the tree. Even from 40 feet above, she could tell he was unusually tall. Broad shoulders stretched beneath a dark traveling coat. The fading sunlight caught the edges of his dark hair as the horse shifted beneath him. Something about the pair looked effortless, as though horse and rider moved as one. The stranger tilted his head upward, searching for her location. "I still cannot see you. Try looking slightly to your left." A few seconds passed. Then his eyes found her. Evelyn froze. Even at a distance, there was something striking about his gaze. Sharp, focused, alert in a way that made it seem as though he noticed everything. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. "You are actually stuck." That is generally what happens when someone says they are stuck. This time he did laugh. It was not cruel laughter, not mocking, just genuine amusement. The sound caught Evelyn completely off guard. "Fair point," he admitted. His horse snorted softly beneath him. "Would you like some help?" "I have been hoping someone would ask that for the last 3 hours." The stranger swung down from the saddle in one smooth motion. His boots landed lightly on the forest floor. As he stepped closer to the tree, Evelyn noticed the easy confidence in the way he moved. Not arrogant, not showy, simply certain, like someone accustomed to responsibility. He rested one hand against the trunk and glanced upward again. "Tell me something," he said. "How exactly did you end up there?" Evelyn looked toward the tiny nest above her. The baby birds peered over the edge, chirping happily. When she pointed toward them, the stranger followed her gaze. Understanding slowly appeared across his face. For the first time since he arrived, his expression changed completely. The amusement softened into something quieter, something warmer. He looked back at her. "You climbed 40 feet into a tree for a bird." Evelyn shrugged as much as her position allowed. It seemed like a good idea at the time. The stranger stared at her for a long moment before shaking his head with disbelief. Yet there was something unusual in his eyes now. Not judgment, not annoyance. Something closer to admiration. And for reasons neither of them understood yet, neither could look away first. Evelyn was the first to look away. She blamed the height, the exhaustion, and the fact that staring at a stranger from the middle of a tree felt slightly ridiculous. The man below seemed equally aware of the situation. He folded his arms loosely and studied the branches above her. Evening shadows stretched across the forest floor while the last traces of sunlight painted the upper canopy in soft gold. "All right," he said. "Let us see what we are working with." Evelyn watched as he slowly circled the base of the tree. His movements were careful and deliberate. Unlike most people she knew, he never appeared rushed. Every step seemed measured, every glance purposeful. Even his horse remained calm nearby, grazing quietly among the grass as though it trusted its rider completely. "You know," Evelyn said, "most people would have laughed longer before trying to help." The stranger glanced up. "I considered it. I appreciate your honesty. I find it easier to keep track of the truth." A smile threatened to appear on Evelyn's face again. That was unexpected. Most conversations with strangers made her uncomfortable. Yet speaking with him felt strangely easy. Comfortable, even. The realization surprised her. "How long have you been up there?" he asked. "Almost 4 hours." He stopped walking. "4 hours? Maybe a little more. And nobody came looking for you?" The question was simple. Casual, even. Yet something about it made Evelyn hesitate. She looked away toward the distant horizon where evening clouds glowed purple and orange. "Not exactly." The stranger's expression shifted slightly. "Not exactly?" Evelyn shrugged. "I spend a lot of time alone." The answer felt safer than explaining everything else. She did not want to talk about being overlooked, about how easily people forgot she existed, about how she had grown accustomed to silence. The man seemed to understand more than she had said aloud. He nodded once, but did not press further. Instead, he stepped closer to the trunk and reached for a low branch. Can you move your left foot? Evelyn carefully glanced downward. Maybe. Maybe is not especially reassuring. You asked for honesty. A faint laugh escaped him again. There it was. That same warm sound she had heard earlier. Somehow it made the growing darkness feel less intimidating. Fair enough, he admitted. Evelyn slowly shifted her weight. The branch beneath her creaked. Her stomach dropped. She immediately froze. Do not move, the stranger said calmly. His voice remained steady, completely unshaken. Oddly enough, that steadiness helped her breathe easier. I was not planning to. Excellent strategy. He reached higher and tested another branch. I think I can climb up. Evelyn's eyes widened. You can. I climbed worse trees when I was younger. That sounds like the beginning of a story. Most stories begin with poor decisions. Then we have something in common. This time the smile reached his eyes. For a brief moment, the forest seemed brighter despite the fading light. A cool breeze swept through the branches overhead. Leaves danced across the canopy while the tiny birds above chirped happily inside their nest. The stranger looked up toward them. They seemed pleased with themselves. They are not the ones trapped. True. Evelyn shifted slightly and followed his gaze toward the nest. At least they are safe. The words came out softer than she intended. The man studied her for a moment. You climbed all the way up here for creatures that weigh less than a few ounces. Someone had to help them, even if it meant getting stuck yourself. Evelyn nodded. Especially then. The answer seemed to catch him off guard. For a second, neither of them spoke. The evening wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a creek continued its quiet song through the forest. Then the stranger reached for the trunk and placed one boot against the bark. Well, he said, I suppose that means it is my turn to help someone. With that, he began climbing toward her. The stranger climbed with surprising ease. His movements were smooth and controlled, as though he had spent years navigating forests far more difficult than this one. Evelyn watched him carefully as he moved from branch to branch, the fading sunlight catching against his dark coat. Within moments he had reached the halfway point. You were not exaggerating, he called upward. This tree is much taller from the inside. I tried to warn you. You failed to mention the impressive number of branches. I assumed you could see them. He shook his head with a smile and continued climbing. The distance between them slowly disappeared. For the first time, Evelyn began noticing details she could not see from the ground. The stranger looked slightly older than she had first guessed, perhaps around 30. There was a quiet confidence about him that made age difficult to estimate. His dark hair brushed the collar of his coat. His features were sharp, but not severe. Most surprising of all were his eyes. Even in the dim evening light, they seemed unusually bright, reflecting the last traces of sunset through the canopy. A few minutes later, he reached the branch directly beneath her. Well, he said, steadying himself against the trunk. You are somehow even more stuck than I imagined. Evelyn groaned. Thank you for that helpful observation. I pride myself on identifying problems and solving them. Usually. That answer made her pause. Usually. Not always. Something about the honesty felt refreshing. Most people preferred pretending they could fix everything. The stranger simply stated the truth. He examined the tangled fabric of her dress where it had become wrapped around a thick fork in the branches. I see the problem. Wonderful. Unfortunately, I also see why you could not fix it yourself. Less wonderful. The branch shifted slightly as he adjusted his position. Instinctively, Evelyn tightened her grip. Relax, he said calmly. The branch is stronger than it looks. That is easy for you to say. You are not hanging above 40 feet of air. Technically, I am. She glanced down. He was. They were both suspended high above the forest floor. Somehow that realization made her laugh despite herself. The sound surprised her. It had been a long time since laughter came so easily. The stranger looked up. There it is. What? The smile. Evelyn immediately felt warmth rush into her cheeks. I do not know what you are talking about. Of course not. His expression remained innocent enough that she knew he was teasing her. Before she could respond, movement above them caught her attention. The baby birds shifted inside their nest. One tiny head appeared over the edge, staring down at the two humans occupying its tree. I think they are judging us, the stranger said. They probably are. Fair. He carefully reached toward the trapped section of fabric. Hold still. Evelyn obeyed. His hands moved slowly, making sure not to damage the dress or startle her. There was patience in everything he did. No frustration. No irritation. As though helping a stranded omega in the middle of a tree was a perfectly reasonable way to spend an evening. You know, he said while working, most people would not have climbed this high for a nest. Evelyn looked toward the birds. Most people are smarter than me. I do not think that is the reason. His response came quietly. So quietly she almost missed it. Something about his tone made her glance back toward him. For a moment neither spoke. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them. Then a sudden cracking sound echoed somewhere above. Both of them looked up at the same time. A large branch several feet overhead shifted under its own weight. Leaves trembled. Tiny pieces of bark drifted downward through the air. The stranger immediately steadied himself against the trunk. Evelyn's heartbeat quickened. The branch creaked again, louder this time, and neither of them looked away. The forest fell silent. Even the birds seemed to sense the change. Evelyn stared upward as the heavy branch shifted again, sending a shower of leaves drifting through the fading light. Her pulse quickened. The stranger remained perfectly still, one hand braced against the trunk while his eyes tracked every movement above them. There was no panic in his expression. No fear. Only careful attention. Is that normal? Evelyn asked quietly. Not particularly, he replied. That is not the answer I was hoping for. I know. Another creak echoed through the canopy. This time it was followed by a sharp snapping sound somewhere deeper in the tree. Evelyn instinctively gripped the branch tighter. The stranger immediately looked back toward her. Do not worry. That is also difficult right now. To her surprise, he smiled. You are handling this remarkably well. I have been trapped in a tree for 4 hours. My standards for success have become very flexible. His laughter drifted through the branches once more. The sound eased some of the tension in her chest. Slowly, the branch above settled into place. The movement stopped. The forest returned to its normal rhythm. Crickets began singing in the distance. A breeze stirred the leaves overhead. The immediate danger seemed to pass. Evelyn released a breath she had not realized she was holding. I think we survived. An impressive accomplishment, the stranger agreed. He returned his attention to the tangled fabric holding her in place. Now let us focus on getting you back to solid ground. Evelyn nodded. As he worked, she noticed a small tear along the sleeve of his coat. Beneath it, the cuff of his shirt had been scraped against the rough bark during the climb. It was not serious, but it caught her attention immediately. Your arm. He glanced down. It is nothing. It does not look like nothing. Occupational hazard. Your occupation involves climbing trees? Occasionally. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. You answer questions very strangely. I have been told that before. She shook her head. You still have not told me your name. For the first time, he hesitated. The pause lasted only a second, but she noticed it. Lucas, he said finally. Lucas, is that disappointing? I do not know. You seem like someone with a more dramatic name. I will try harder next time. Evelyn laughed again. The sound felt unfamiliar and wonderful all at once. Lucas carefully loosened another section of fabric. There. The tension around her dress eased slightly. Can you move now? Evelyn cautiously shifted her leg. For the first time in hours, she felt freedom. A little. Good. You actually might be rescuing me. That was always the plan. The words were simple, yet something about them settled warmly inside her chest. The forest had grown darker now. The first stars appeared between the branches overhead. Somewhere below, Lucas's horse lifted its head and let out a quiet snort. Evelyn followed the sound and glanced toward the ground far beneath them. Your horse has been very patient. He is accustomed to waiting. For stranded women in trees? Lucas looked up at her, amusement brightening his eyes. No, this is a completely new experience for both of us. Before Evelyn could reply, a distant sound drifted through the evening air. Hoofbeats. Not one horse this time. Several. Lucas's expression changed instantly. The easy humor vanished. His attention shifted toward the forest beyond the tree line. And for the first time since meeting him, Evelyn saw something unexpected in his eyes. Concern. The distant hoofbeats rolled through the forest like a gathering storm. Evelyn listened as the sound grew steadily louder, echoing between the towering pines. Lucas remained motionless beside the trunk, his attention fixed somewhere beyond the trees. The easy warmth that had defined their conversation all evening seemed to disappear behind a mask of careful focus. "Are they looking for you?" Evelyn asked quietly. Lucas glanced upward. For a brief moment, the seriousness vanished, replaced by the familiar calm expression she had come to trust. Possibly. Possibly is not a very comforting answer. It is an honest one. The hoofbeats continued approaching. Whoever the riders were, they were moving quickly. Evelyn noticed that Lucas seemed less surprised by their arrival than concerned about their timing. "Should I be worried?" she asked. "No," the answer came immediately. Too immediately. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. That sounded suspicious. "Then let me clarify." He shifted slightly on the branch beneath her. "You are perfectly safe." Something about the certainty in his voice made her believe him. The strange thing was that she had known him for less than an hour. Yet somehow, hanging 40 feet above the forest floor with a stranger felt safer than many evenings she had spent among people she had known for years. The realization caught her off guard. Lucas turned his attention back to the tangled fabric. "We need to finish this before they arrive." "Who exactly are they?" "People who ask far too many questions." Evelyn laughed softly. "That sounds familiar." "Does it? You have answered almost none of mine." Lucas looked genuinely thoughtful. "That is a fair criticism." "I know." Another section of fabric finally slipped free from the branch. Evelyn felt her balance improve immediately. Relief washed through her. "I can move more now," she said. "Good. You actually did it." "I am beginning to think so." A smile touched his face. For reasons she could not explain, that small smile felt like a victory. Not because she was finally getting out of the tree, but because it seemed rare. Like something he did not share with many people. The approaching riders were much closer now. Through gaps in the forest, flashes of lantern light appeared between the trees. Lucas noticed them too. His expression tightened slightly. "That cannot be good," Evelyn said. "It depends on your definition of good. I suspect ours are different." "Probably." The tiny birds above them chirped again, completely unaware of the growing tension below. Evelyn glanced toward the nest and smiled. "At least they are having a pleasant evening." Lucas followed her gaze. "You really do worry about everyone except yourself." "Someone has to." The answer seemed to affect him more than she intended. He became unusually quiet. The sounds of the approaching riders filled the silence between them. For a long moment, Lucas simply looked at her. Not the awkward situation. Not the tangled branches. Her. As though he was seeing something he had not expected to find. Then the first rider emerged from the trees below. A lantern swung beside the saddle, casting golden light across the forest floor. Several more riders followed behind. The moment they entered the clearing, every horse came to an abrupt stop. An astonished silence spread through the group. One of the riders slowly looked upward into the tree. Then another. And another. Evelyn frowned, confused by their reaction. Beside her, Lucas closed his eyes for the briefest second, as though something inevitable had finally arrived. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The riders remained frozen beneath the tree, their lanterns casting pools of golden light across the forest floor. Evelyn glanced from the strangers below to Lucas beside her. The contrast was impossible to miss. Every rider appeared startled. Lucas appeared resigned, as though he had been hoping to avoid exactly this moment. One of the riders finally dismounted. He was a broad-shouldered man with silver trim on his dark cloak. The instant his boots touched the ground, he lowered his head respectfully. "My lord," he said. The words drifted upward through the branches. Evelyn blinked. "My lord?" She looked at Lucas. He rubbed a hand across his face. "Good evening, Marcus." "We have been searching for hours," the rider replied. The entire escort was preparing to expand the search beyond the western border. "That seems unnecessary." Marcus stared at him in disbelief. "Unnecessary?" Lucas gestured vaguely toward the tree around them. "As you can see, I have been occupied." Several riders exchanged confused glances. One of them actually looked upward at Evelyn, then back to Lucas, then upward again as if trying to understand what he was seeing. Evelyn felt her face grow warm. "I would like to point out," she said quietly, "that I was the one stuck in the tree." A few of the riders immediately looked away, clearly unsure whether they should respond. To her surprise, Lucas laughed. "That is true." The tension among the riders eased slightly. Marcus, however, continued staring upward with a look that suggested he was witnessing something impossible. "My lord," he said carefully, "the council meeting begins tomorrow morning." "I am aware." Several delegates have already arrived. I am aware of that as well. And yet you are currently in a tree. Lucas considered this a fair observation. Evelyn pressed her lips together, trying very hard not to smile. Beside her, Lucas appeared completely unconcerned by the growing confusion below. If anything, he seemed more relaxed than he had all evening. Marcus eventually sighed. Should we assist? Not yet. Lucas returned his attention to the tangled branch. We are nearly finished. The riders fell silent once more. The forest seemed unusually still. Even the crickets had quieted. Evelyn watched Lucas carefully as he worked. The pieces were beginning to fit together now. The confidence, the authority, the way the riders responded to him without hesitation. None of it belonged to an ordinary traveler. Lucas, she said softly. He glanced up. Yes. What exactly do they mean when they call you my lord? The question hung in the air. Below them, several riders suddenly became fascinated by nearby trees. Marcus looked as though he wanted to disappear entirely. Lucas closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, there was no humor left in his expression. Only honesty. I was hoping to explain that after we got you down. Evelyn's stomach fluttered unexpectedly. That sounds like a very dangerous answer. It probably is. For a moment neither spoke. The lantern light flickered through the branches between them. Then Lucas carefully loosened the final piece of trapped fabric. The tension disappeared instantly. Evelyn felt herself shift free at last. Her eyes widened. Lucas. Yes. I think I am finally unstuck. A genuine smile appeared on his face. Warm. Relieved. Real. Good, he said softly. Because there is something important I need to tell you once we reach the ground. For a moment, Evelyn simply stared at him. The words should have brought relief. She was finally free. After hours trapped among branches and leaves, she should have been thinking about solid ground, warm food, and sleep. Instead, all she could focus on was the strange look in Lucas's eyes. It was the same look she had noticed several times throughout the evening, as though he was carrying a truth he had not wanted to share. All right, she said softly. How do we get down? Lucas glanced toward the forest floor. Carefully. Very reassuring. I am trying my best. The riders below remained unusually quiet. Several of them watched with expressions that ranged from concern to outright disbelief. One younger guard appeared completely fascinated by the sight of his ruler sitting in a tree. Marcus eventually cleared his throat. My lord. Yes, Marcus. Please do not fall. Lucas sighed. Thank you for the encouragement. A few of the riders immediately looked away, trying unsuccessfully to hide their amusement. Evelyn found herself smiling again. Somehow, despite everything she had learned in the last few minutes, Lucas still felt like the same man who had climbed a tree to help a stranger. He carefully shifted onto a lower branch. Follow my instructions. That sounds dangerous. Have I given you any reason not to trust me? Evelyn opened her mouth, then paused. Surprisingly, she could not think of one. Fine, she admitted. Lead the way. Step by step, they began descending. The process was slower than climbing up. Darkness had settled fully across the forest now. Lantern light flickered through the branches below, painting the tree with warm gold and soft shadows. Every few feet Lucas stopped to make sure she was secure before continuing downward. The simple patience of it touched her more than she wanted to admit. Nobody had ever taken this much care with her before. Eventually the distance to the ground shrank. 20 feet, then 15, then 10. Evelyn could finally smell the earth beneath the tree. The familiar scent of grass and pine seemed almost unreal after spending an entire afternoon above the forest floor. When her boots finally touched solid ground, she froze. For a second, she simply stood there. Then she laughed. A bright, genuine laugh filled with relief. I made it. You did. Lucas landed beside her a moment later. The riders immediately straightened. Several lowered their heads respectfully. The change in atmosphere was impossible to ignore. The easy forest conversation vanished. Formality replaced it. Authority settled around Lucas like an invisible cloak. For the first time, Evelyn truly saw it. The quiet confidence. The effortless respect. The way everyone instinctively looked to him. Marcus stepped forward. Your Majesty. The words hit Evelyn like a sudden gust of wind. Your Majesty. Not my lord. Not commander. Not governor. Your Majesty. Her smile disappeared. Slowly, she turned toward Lucas. The forest seemed to fall silent again. Even the riders stopped moving. Lucas met her gaze without looking away. "Evelyn," he said gently, "there is something I should have told you earlier." Her heart began to pound. She already knew. Somehow she already knew. Yet hearing it felt impossible. "You are the Alpha King," she whispered. Lucas nodded once. No excuses. No explanations. Just the truth. Around them, every rider remained perfectly still. Evelyn looked from the royal escort to the man who had spent the evening laughing with her in a tree. The man who had climbed 40 feet to help a stranger save a family of birds. The man she had spoken to as though he were ordinary. And somehow, despite everything she had just learned, that was still the person she saw standing before her. For several seconds, Evelyn could not find her voice. The forest around them seemed unchanged. The same trees stood beneath the stars. The same lanterns flickered softly among the riders. Yet everything felt different now. The man she had spent the evening teasing, arguing with, and laughing beside was not simply a traveler named Lucas. He was the Alpha King, the most powerful man in the territories. And somehow that realization felt impossible to connect with the person standing before her. Lucas remained quiet, giving her time to process the truth. He did not step closer. He did not try to explain. He simply waited. The patience she had noticed all evening had not disappeared. Eventually, Evelyn folded her arms and looked up at him. "You let me call you strange." A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "You call me several things. I accused you of answering questions badly." That was accurate. A few riders exchanged startled looks. None of them seemed accustomed to hearing someone speak to their king this way. Evelyn noticed and suddenly became self-conscious. "I should probably apologize." "Why?" Lucas asked. "Because apparently I spent an hour talking to the Alpha King as if he were an ordinary person." To her surprise, his expression softened. "That was the best part of my day." The answer caught her completely off guard. The surrounding riders felt even quieter. Lucas glanced upward through the branches toward the tiny nest hidden high above. "Most people speak to my title first and me second." His eyes returned to hers. "You never did." Evelyn looked away for a moment. The cool evening breeze brushed through the clearing, carrying the scent of pine and fresh earth. Somewhere high above, the baby birds chirped softly in their nest. Safe, warm, protected. The reason all of this had happened in the first place. Lucas followed the sound. "You know," he said quietly, "I have spent years meeting leaders, diplomats, warriors, and nobles." Evelyn listened without interrupting. "Today I rode into this forest expecting another long list of responsibilities." A faint smile touched his face. "Instead, I found an omega hanging 40 feet above the ground because she refused to abandon a family of birds." Heat crept into Evelyn's cheeks. "When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous." "It sounds kind." The answer settled gently between them. No one spoke for several moments. The lantern light flickered across Lucas's features while the stars slowly brightened overhead. For the first time that evening, Evelyn realized she was not nervous around him. Surprised, certainly. Confused, absolutely. But not afraid. Lucas took a slow breath and looked toward the nest one final time. "A broken branch trapped you up there," he said. "But that is not what I will remember about today." Evelyn tilted her head. "What will you remember?" His eyes met hers. Steady, honest, unusually warm. "I will remember someone who saw a small life that needed help and climbed toward it without expecting anything in return." The words lingered in the night air. Around them, even the riders seemed reluctant to interrupt the moment. Evelyn followed his gaze back to the nest hidden among the branches. The birds were asleep now, safe because someone had cared enough to stop. A smile slowly appeared on her face. She had climbed that tree to save a few tiny creatures. She had expected nothing more than a difficult afternoon. Instead, standing beneath the stars, she had the strange feeling that this was not an ending at all. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had been searching for, yet somehow had found anyway.